This show is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
This episode is brought to you by NPR's Life Kit podcast. Let me tell you a true story. I was just outside in my backyard doing a little gardening and, as always, absolutely getting demolished by mosquitoes. Then I came in to record this very message right here about NPR's Life Kit, a show that gives you useful guidance to live your life a little better. And guess what their most recent episode is about? How to actually make yourself less attractive to mosquitoes. See, that is exactly the kind of advice you get from Life Kit, from fitness routines to mental resilience to navigating personal goals. Life Kit offers real stories, relevant insights, and clear takeaways. Finances, parenting, household chores. It's not just self-improvement. It is about living a better life starting right now. And yes, there's advice about mosquitoes. Look, I'm not going to spoil that episode for you. You should go listen to it. But that citronella candle, it's probably not doing anything. Anyway, go check out their list of episodes. I'm sure you will find something with some advice that you are looking for. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, July 22nd, 1934, a sweltering 101-degree day in Chicago. So a man by the name of John Dillinger tries to escape the heat by taking in a movie. That movie is Manhattan Melodrama. And he goes to a local theater to watch that movie, and then when he comes out at 10:40 p.m., 20 federal agents are waiting for him. He's ordered to surrender. Instead, Dillinger takes off running, where he's quickly gunned down before he could get to an alley down the block. John Dillinger, of course, that name very familiar, was not just any regular moviegoer. He was one of the most notorious and celebrated criminals in the whole country, a bank robber, a gangster at the height of the gangster era in the United States. His death, in many ways, marked the beginning of the end for that gangster era and a turning point because it was kind of the end of the beginning for the Department of Investigation, which would soon be renamed the FBI and start to turn into the FBI that we know today. So let's go to 1934, Dillinger, Hoover, gangsters, G-men, and lots more. Here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. All of us wearing fedoras. It's amazing.
That's right. No, you can't see it, guys, but we all got the hats on. Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
We did that episode just recently about air conditioning and talked about how movie theaters were one of the first to adopt air conditioning, and that led to a huge rise in the movie industry. And here's an example of that. Even John Dillinger needs to escape the heat into the air conditioning of a movie theater. Let me give a little sketch of Dillinger himself. I mean, I will tell you, the main thing that pops out to me, he's 31 when he's killed. Young, right? And so many stories from history, like, oh my gosh, these people were young. But moreover, his, reign of escapades and bank robbery, it was basically a year long. I mean, it was short.
Yeah,
right?
that really shocked me, too, because it's like these larger-than-life figures, and you go back and you're like, wait, so this was 10 months?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I was going to say, this isn't a decade. This isn't I'm thinking Al Capone. I'm thinking big mob boss that's been operating for years. Right. No.
Or the Godfather movies where it's generational and all this stuff.
Yes.
And, we'll get into this, but it's because I think, or it shows that this is so much a product of really changing media environment and political environment. And it's kind of the first moment where someone's celebrity can rocket in a matter of months and then burn out so quickly. But yeah, I mean, Dillinger robs 11 banks for more than $300,000 in just the course of a year. He kills 7 police officers and 3 federal agents throughout that spree. And, I think that there is a kind of new media machine that can turn him into a celebrity. He was also a compelling character. I'm willing to say it, right?
I think that's right. I mean, as you read more about John Dillinger, there are lots of bank robbers and mobsters in this period, thanks in part to Prohibition. But he's somebody who captures the public imagination because he's exactly what you think of when you think of George Clooney or Brad Pitt playing a bank robber, right? They catapult themselves over railings and they flirt and wink with the bank teller. And there's just this sense of charisma and charm that grows up around Dillinger as a character, because that's what he becomes. He becomes a character and he plays into that, right? He has these daring escapes and these escapades that become just really compelling to Americans who are watching his story unfold.
Yeah, but also I think people see him as a Robin Hood, even though he's not really giving money to the poor. He's sticking it to the man. He is robbing people that have made their money either through pushing down the little guy or, heightened capitalism. And so his robbing of these banks and sort of getting back at them, even if that wealth is not being sort of dissipated throughout the community, is still something that is considered praiseworthy because someone's getting over. Some guy who started from the bottom is now making it.
And he's robbing banks at a time when the reputation of banks in the United States is at an all-time low. We just had that episode on the bank holiday. And this idea that people had put their life savings into banks and banks had lost all of their money. Now people were putting their money under mattresses. And so banks weren't the heroes of the story.
No.
They were the bad guys. And so this guy taking their money for some Americans would have been something to applaud.
Yeah.
Because the banks took their money.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So there's a letter to the editor in a newspaper in Indiana, which is where Dillinger was from, and a lot of his bank robberies took place. But, someone wrote a letter to a newspaper saying, why should the log be going after John Dillinger? He wasn't any worse than the bankers and politicians who took poor people's money. Dillinger did not rob poor people. He robbed those that became rich by robbing the poor. I am for Johnny. So that's just one letter writer. But, there's rumors even that people were saying he should be governor of Indiana. I mean, who knows? It's like saying The Rock should be run for president. And there you go. I do want to highlight, again, the media environment here because movies, newsreels, tons of, newspapers. This is an era in newspapers in which there are kind of the morning edition and the evening edition. It all leads to this feedback loop between Dillinger and the public to the point where, I think it's not just that his escapades are being covered, but he's able to kind of do things that he sees are getting a good public reaction. And it's sounds a lot like people doing stuff for the gram right now. You do something, you see the reaction, and it pushes you even further to act, often stupid or, reckless or whatever, because you get that feedback. But there is that sort of feedback loop here.
He's a victim of audience capture.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. In addition to, wanting to get some money.
But also, he has kind of a how did he do it connected to him because he's constantly getting arrested, going into jail, breaking out of jail, getting arrested, breaking out again. And you're like, how are you doing this? How are you breaking out of jail all the time? He has, and when he's in jail, this is when he develops his friendships that really allow him to take his robbing of banks to a whole nother level. But yeah, it makes me want to really think about when you think about policing and the prison system and how people were incarcerated then, it was it seems very easy to sort of break out of those systems, not in the way that we think of high security level prisons today, but back then I don't know, it seemed like the guard falls asleep and you just break out. I'm like, how is he getting out of these things?
That ties into this being such a story about a kind of transition point to, we'll talk about it, but the sort of the policing infrastructure in this country sort of professionalizing over the course of this and often spurred by this sort of showdown with gangsters. And I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, I think that's actually an important story because there's this great story about one of the times when Dillinger breaks out of jail. He steals a cop car, and he before he gets into the car, he takes the ignition wires out of all of the other vehicles there, and so he hops in this car and gets away. That's an important story in the FBI part of this because having cars, which gangsters had access to, meant they were constantly crossing state lines, and as soon as they crossed a state line, then the federal police force, the FBI, then the Bureau of Investigation could get involved. And that's how the FBI, Hoover, all of these people start to get involved in Dillinger's story. And so you have these kind of you both have haphazard local and state police. But then you have the FBI, which is trying to emerge as this institution under Hoover, also kind of getting embarrassed a lot because you have these stories of Dillinger just like constantly getting one up on him. And that really makes them double down their focus on Dillinger. Like he becomes the obstacle to them becoming this sort of like lauded institution.
Yeah. All right, folks, time to tell you about a brilliant new show joining the Radiotopia family. It comes from Alex Sujan Laughlin, who you probably know as one of the co-creators of Normal Gossip and just an all-around brilliant producer. This show is called Try Hard. It is so hard to try something new. Maybe you dream of playing guitar or speaking fluent Spanish. Maybe you want to learn to tap dance or do magic tricks or yodel. I personally, in the last year, have started to take singing lessons. Really hard. But guess what? What if you had a little bit of help in the form of Alex Sujan Laughlin? Each episode, Alex helps one ordinary person do the thing that they never thought they could. The process is embarrassing and uncomfortable, but hopefully always worth it. So join in, be a tryhard, check it out. The new show from Defector Media and Radiotopia is out July 28th, wherever you get your podcasts. And congratulations to Alex and team. I want to take a moment to tell you about Quince, your solution to stylish summer clothes. Now, I am recording this very spot on what I would say is the first true summer day here where I live. It is hot. It is sunny. I'm not going to lie. It's a little sticky even down here in my office. It is all those things, but it can still also be stylish. To me, peak summer is the time to go back to those reliable, high-quality staples in your wardrobe. Obviously, there's linen. And lucky for you, Quince has a ton of great linen clothing, from button-downs to pants to shorts. I have fully flipped the switch to linen, sometimes all linen. I am wearing my 100% European linen drawstring beach pants right now. They go great with sandals, but I can also dress them up a little bit if I want to throw on a button-down or even a light jacket. By the way, those linen pants, they're under $50. How does Quince do this? Well, it's by working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman. Quince gives you luxury without the markup. Give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/thisday for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thisday to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thisday. Stay cool out there, folks. So I think at this point it's technically called the Bureau of Investigation, and then it turns into the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the Bureau of Investigation is a division of the. Anyway, it's not called the FBI at this point, and actually no, but but this ties into the larger story Niki's telling, which is sort of in the wake of Dillinger is when it gets renamed, becomes its own independent agency, gets a ton of funding and so forth. It uses this high profile showdown to do that. But yes, like we mentioned Hoover's name. Obviously, the many movies that have been made about this, including that movie Public Enemies, these are the two Titanic characters. Right? We have Dillinger, the swashbuckling gangster running around, sliding over railings and winking at bank tellers. And then we have Hoover, who we've talked about a lot of times, and is trying to kind of build up his agency here by going after it and sort of systematize. But it's so important to emphasize how kind of two-bit things were for much of the early part of the 30s, and just they're recruiting local cops or random volunteers who could have very well been on the other side of the equation, and they're just bringing them in, and they don't really have systems in place. Forensic science is just getting going here, and so it's this real inflection point where even just 10 years later you can see how much
has changed.
Things have changed.
Yeah, Hoover's trying to professionalize the FBI. Yeah. I mean, because they bundle or they fumble a lot of their investigations. And so part of the thing that Hoover is trying to do is not just professionalize them, but almost militarize them so that the country takes them seriously as the country's police force. And so that once they get involved, that this has been taken up to another level, that they're going to sort of handle it well, but it takes a while to get that sort of uniformity and purpose.
Yeah. And a lot of high-profile fiascos, too, including in the run-up to this Dillinger killing.
And with the Dillinger killing, I mean, this is also sort of like in the origin story of what would become the FBI, there's a confidential informant embedded right from the beginning. In this case, it was a woman named Anna Sage, who was a brothel madam in Chicago, who was born in Romania. They were getting ready to deport her. And so she has a conversation with the FBI because she's friends with Dillinger. She's like, well, you go a little easy on me in this deportation hearing, and I will take you to Dillinger, who at the time had a $10,000 bounty on his head. So she was also eyeing that because that's a lot of money in the middle of the Depression.
Oh, yes.
In 1934. And so she becomes the kind of person who turns on Dillinger and draws the FBI to him at this movie theater.
Yeah, she becomes an informant, and she basically says to him, all right, we're going to go to the movies, and I'm going to wear an orange dress, like a bright orange dress. And when you see me come out with a bright orange dress, that's who you know who Dillinger is. Yeah.
The movie Manhattan Melodrama, I went and looked up some of the reviews. I might watch it this weekend. It's about two relatives who are like mixed up at birth, and they separate, but then they fall in love with the same woman or something. I don't know. It seems like it's okay. Almost everything you read about Manhattan Melodrama, though, is this is the movie that John Dillinger watched before he got shot. But anyway, you can go check it out. So brings us back to this moment where he is killed. He's shot as he starts to run away. The streets immediately fill with thousands of people. It becomes a big spectacle. I suppose in the wake of this, it could play in two ways, right? It could continue this narrative of like this folk hero who's gunned down by the law, or it could play as, well, the FBI got him. The good guys got their man. And it seems like that second narrative is kind of what takes off. And it's sort of amazing how things switch from who are the sort of like folk heroes. It turns from the gangsters to the G-men in the next 10, 15 years.
I actually think both stories continue forward. And I think that's the particular complexity of the way that American culture treats law and crime. They celebrate the vigilante and they celebrate the police, and both have pretty sophisticated media operations working for them. We've talked about Dillinger, but one of the things that Hoover does as head of the Bureau is that he starts to push for better coverage and basically propaganda of the FBI. This is one of his big innovations. Police departments will later do this as well with things like Car 54, Where Are You? And Cops and all of these different propaganda type cultural artifacts. But the FBI is doing it very early on with programs like G-Man, which are things that celebrate the FBI. And in fact, we talked about the Hays Code before, which is Hollywood sort of self-censoring. And one of the big things that they did, it wasn't just like, don't show immoral relationships. You have to show crime as immoral and the police as the good guys. And this is a big boon for an organization like the Bureau of Investigation, because now they have a Hollywood giving them the best possible stories.
I cannot tell you how many cop movies I have seen that have glorified, like Mississippi Burning. You have all these stories in which the cops are the heroes. They're the smartest people in the room. They always catch the criminal. You get a completely different narrative from that of your romanticized gangster with the Tommy gun and the semi-automatic and the getaway and all of that stuff. The narrative completely changes. There's still some of that there, but there's definitely more stories where the cops are the good guys and the winners.
And the narrative changes, and related to that also the sort of infrastructure and the government backing really changes. So actually this year that we're talking about, before Dillinger's killed in the summer, just that spring, FDR signed a huge law that gave a ton more money to what would become the FBI. And that was obviously Hoover's big legacy, is kind of professionalizing, but also creating an entire, industrial complex around this. And, well, a couple things on that front. One, I cannot help but see sort of an interesting pivot moment, parallel moment right now, where you have a kind of like roughshod police force out there up to some stuff, and then you get an injection of a ton of funding, and you get a sort of like ratcheting up of the propaganda around it. And I think we're living in a moment there with ICE and Border Patrol now, where we're kind of seeing that. And it's like, that's what happened here. It's like a huge government funding bill supercharged this agency. But the bigger question that I want to end on is, we think of the New Deal as being an era where government's role expanded considerably and largely the money was spent on sort of social service and so forth. But should we think of policing as a sort of New Deal project? If it is Roosevelt who's kind of helping the FBI expand in this way, maybe that's part of the New Deal story as well.
It is the story of 20th century progressive governance. And it gets elided because there's a tendency to tell this sort of progressive, rights-driven story about liberalism in the 20th century. But go back to the progressive era. That's when local police forces begin to professionalize. Policing is a big part of progressive governance in the early 20th century. And then you get the FBI, and then you get the warfare state. And all of this is what big government in the 20th century is, and it is wrapped into the liberal project. When we talked about Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty turning into the war on crime, those things were always linked.
Yeah.
And there are these moments when it becomes more explicit like this. But as we're thinking about the legacies of liberalism and maybe what progressivism should look like in the 21st century, I think there has to be a reckoning with how central policing at all levels of government were to the liberal project throughout the 20th century.
Yeah. Such a good point.
All right. Well, let's leave it there with Dillinger and Hoover. And we should also say the name of the cop who got him, the FBI agent who got him, was Melvin Purvis, who becomes kind of famous on the backs of this as well, and is played by Christian Bale in that movie Public Enemies, which and then also goes on to play a much more laudable, I would say, crime fighter. But anyway, we will leave it there. Before we go, a thank you to everyone who has helped support our efforts over at the newsletter for America 250 Watch. You can subscribe to the newsletter and help us cover the semi-quincentennial. For the price of going to watch Manhattan Melodrama in 1934, you can help support our efforts. You can go to thisdaypod.com and become a subscriber to the newsletter. But thanks to all of you who have done that. And thanks to you, Nicole Hemmer.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson. Thanks to you.
My pleasure.
John Dillinger, Prince of Crime. Chains, guards, and locksmiths? Why, he laughed at them. He laughed at the law, and he laughed at death, too. But death laughed last as he brazenly left the Chicago movie theater. A blast of federal bullets, and Dillinger, public enemy number one, reached the end of his meteoric career.
Radiotopia.